listening to WCPT's To the Left with Samina and Shauna. Here's our hosts, Samina Mustafa and Shauna East.
Thank you, Lady B. We are back. I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
So the thumbs up I gave, if somebody already saw that, is because we got the signal from Dennis that we are cross-posted on Facebook Live.
Yes, I love it.
You can see us. You can hear us. You can see us on Facebook Live at our Facebook page at To The Left Radio. All of our handles are at To The Left Radio. We are on WCPT 820. Wow, what a week. We're going to have actually an awesome show. We're talking about disability rights, poverty, and race. No big deal. Not too much to cover in about an hour. We have some awesome guests. We have Alex Lawson from Social Security Works. We're gonna have JJ Wett. He's the vice chair of DeKalb County Democrats.
Correct.
Who will be calling in, and we have Sharonda Knott Dawson in our fancy green room, aka the conference room. We'll be on a little bit. But first things first. We're going to chat a little bit, as we do. Shauna, what's on your mind?
Well, one thing that happened this week that I found to be quite disturbing, and I'm doing something about it, is our president, Donald Trump, tweeted a very disturbing video montage of Ilhan Omar speaking at a CAIR care event, interspersed with footage of the Twin Towers being attacked and crumbling, very much inciting, potentially violence against her. He tweeted that, and it's like you said, pinned to his page now. And I mean, I reported it. You said you reported it. I don't know any other purpose for this video or tweet other than to incite violence or hatred against Ilhan Omar because of her race and her religion. It is disgusting. It is shameful. He's an embarrassment to the human race. And, I'm going to raise some money for her because she, needs help. I'm concerned for her security, and it's just disgusting.
Yeah, so I saw that too, and I appreciate your, taking steps, but let's be clear. This is not something that's, an isolated attack. He has been attacking Muslims since his campaign, and frankly, if you go back, the whole birther movement was part of an Islamophobic message and a xenophobic message too. So, as you and I were talking earlier this week, it's hard to believe that in the last 7 days, there was actually a House hearing on white nationalism. Believe it or not, that was this week too, guys. And the father of two women who were killed in what was termed at the time a parking dispute. There were two women who wore hijab. This happened in North Carolina, I think Raleigh-Durham area, if I'm not mistaken. And it was the two women and they were newlyweds. One of the daughters had just gotten married, she and her husband. A neighbor came into their apartment and shot them in cold blood. And most people, this happened in early 2015. Most people didn't even hear about the story when it happened. Mm-hmm. The fathers testified on Capitol Hill, and Democrats and Republicans asked him, does Islam teach you to hate? Does Islam teach hate? Those were questions asked of him. So I just want to make it abundantly clear that this is not an isolated incident. I also share your concern, your fear about Ilhan Omar's safety. But I also know that this is something that has been, it's an attack on people of color. It's an attack on immigrant and refugees. It's an attack on religious minorities. Let's be clear. This is part of the overall plan. And it is, after 9/11, one of the first people to be attacked, have a racialized attack against him, was a Sikh man. So, the agenda is clear. It's you are other, you don't belong, you're not American at all or American enough. And I actually shared something on my public page about the saying, I stand with Ilhan Omar. This is part of an overall thing. And some guy with Vietnam, ironically, as his Facebook picture, said, go back to your S blank whole country.
Nice.
So, I mean, just like this is, people feel like they can say that without consequence. And there are still people thinking that there's this opportunity for bipartisanship. No, not when people are going to erase my existence. How do you death is pretty final. You want to kill someone? You want to, put someone in a cage? I can't compromise with you on that. I'm sorry. You've just dehumanized me. That's not negotiable. My humanity is non-negotiable. And I think that's something that is even more disappointing. So I have no expectations of Trump. I know what his frame is. I know what his values are. They're not mine. But what is disappointing is when people are reaching out to their electeds and presidential candidates and say, please say something. Please make a statement. Please stand with us. And the responses are, tepid, or they don't even mention her. Like Nancy Pelosi didn't even mention her. And in some cases, everyone's going to pick it apart because this is actually the time to show, like, what do you really stand for? Rashida Tlaib had an excellent statement she made yesterday, which is, you want us in your picture so you can show that you have diversity. But when we really need you to show up, you're not there. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what she said. I mean, I can share the tweet in our or share the article showing her tweets, but that's what's missing. It's like you want us to make your picture look good, but you aren't there for us when we need you.
Yes, correct. I in no way expect anything of Donald Trump. This is typical and predictable. I do expect more from everyone else on the planet.
Right.
And they're all complicit, and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
An interesting turn of events is that the mainstream media, like MSNBC and stuff, are now coming to Ilhan Omar's defense.
Yes.
Because now it's become about Trump.
Right.
So now they're using her as an opportunity to, more ammo against Trump. Rashida was on AM Joy this morning. It was incredible. I was like, oh my God, they're giving a platform to Rashida Tlaib, and it's not an antagonistic platform. Joy Reid was,
Right. For those of you who are listening and may not have this context, Joy Reid has I'd say a mixed record on progressivism and being sort of more aligned with establishment Democrats.
I don't know her personally, but she's
made several statements.
Yeah,
she's made several statements, and I've followed her on Twitter and seen some of the things she said. So she sometimes doesn't seem like she seems to have a suspicion of progressive candidates and progressive. So, but continue.
Well, she's also a staff member on MSNBC, so I don't know how much is her and how much is just what she's supposed to do as a representative of.
Fair enough.
So I don't really know what she's about personally, but. Well, and I'm not, and people have criticized me on, social media for criticizing Joy Reid, and I'm not insulting her intelligence or her accomplishments as a Black woman or anything like that. I'm just, what is she using her intelligence for at the end of the day is my question.
Yeah, but you were saying, I'm sorry, you were saying about Rashida Tlaib on her show.
I'm saying that she was speaking about what was going on with Ilhan Omar, and it wasn't an antagonistic whatsoever interview with Joy Reid. She was completely being compassionate and understanding, and she was also speaking out against it, which I was just, it's great.
Yeah.
I was just surprised because, they've been criticizing Ilhan Omar, calling her anti-Semitic, and every day on Morning Joe that they talk about her, it's that she's an anti-Semite and terrible human and all this stuff. And this is what the result is.
Right.
It's normalized. Now, so go ahead.
And the fact is she's a convenient and really scary image. Just like, Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez represent something that scares both folks on the right and the left. Ilhan Omar is sort of like, I'd say she's more triggering to some of those folks because of her appearance. She wears hijab. She's a Somali refugee. I mean, like all of the things, like in some ways, like her identity is upsetting to these folks, and they want to use her to set, I guess, a precedent or example, and attack her and think like, oh, we can. And frankly, there's a lot of people who are falling for it. They're saying, oh, she's anti-Semitic. She shouldn't have said this, and not taking the time to look at the context of what she said. But we don't have electeds who would take the time to defend her, and we also don't have a mainstream media that would take the time to actually look at the context of her comments or even what she's done. One of the things that I remember seeing just yesterday was Dan Crenshaw, the congressman from Texas. He was lampooned on SNL, and then they famously apologized. Pete Davidson apologized for doing it. Was attacking Ilhan Omar on Twitter, and people said, well, guess what? Ilhan Omar is actually working on a 9/11 compensation fund that you refused to vote for. You refused to co-sponsor. So she herself is actually taking steps that you won't take, and you're trying to imply or suggest that somehow you have the moral authority on 9/11. The hypocrisy is mind-boggling.
And people are pointing out that the first comment that Donald Trump had after 9/11 was that now Trump Tower is the tallest building down there.
Yes.
So.
And numerous other false statements that he saw, quote, Muslims cheering. The man lies more often than he breathes. I mean, it's amazing how much he lies. And so this is one of those things where it's just, how can you not see it? But again, it fits into a larger framework, which is to demonize the other. And there are real consequences. We saw them in Christchurch in New Zealand. We saw them in the Gurdwara in Wisconsin. We saw it in the church in Charleston. I mean, in the synagogue in Pittsburgh. This is the consequence of that rhetoric. People die. So this is a physical threat. This is a personal threat to Representative Omar, but she's also, this could affect Rashida Tlaib. Just last week, they were calling a GOP fundraising email called Ocasio-Cortez a domestic terrorist. Mm-hmm. They have they're, and then to think that the Democratic leadership has essentially been silent on this.
Yes.
It's real. They're putting, and I said this to someone, I said, they're with their silence, they're putting their lives in danger. There's no question about that. And this doesn't surprise me. It's just, again, it's more of the same. It is more of the same. It's just realizing that we are talking to the void sometimes, I feel like, when it comes to this issue. It's like, when are you going to see that? How many people have to get hurt? It's sort of like the gun violence debate. 1,000 prayers aren't going to work. People aren't taking action. When are you going to take action? When are you going to do something? When are you going to censure Steve King or Dan Crenshaw or Donald Trump?
Silence on this is violence, is just end of story. I cannot deal with complicity on this. It is terrible.
Yeah. And I know it's hard to imagine that. It's hard to imagine. Even like the other thing, and I hate to pile on, but Trump said he's going to send detainees, free them, and send them to sanctuary cities. And he sort of, you saw that, right?
Yeah.
And apparently,
so he doesn't really know the definition of sanctuary cities, does he?
He doesn't. But again, for those folks who don't, but ironically, so Rahm Emanuel was on whatever, I think MSNBC this morning, and a conservative commentator called him out and said, well, why aren't you taking them? Because let's face it, Rahm is not exactly, known as a progressive, and it has really made a lot of missteps on immigration. IRA back in '96 and told Obama to slow walk immigration reform. And was not working on eliminating the gang database. Just locally, like something he could have done. He could have taken a leadership position on that. just lots of things. And so, but I saw that the Oakland mayor said something. I think Lightfoot might have actually made a statement. But so we're coming up on our break.
No, we don't have a break. We're just going straight into talking to our friend Alex Lawson, who's on the line. Sorry to bring you in the middle of a heated discussion. Alex, are you there?
I am, no problem whatsoever. I like heated discussion.
Alex,
We're
hi,
gonna
welcome.
switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, no, we can keep Alex on.
What? Any comment about what's going on with Ilhan Omar this week?
Yeah, always. I mean, I wish I could say that I was shocked at the cowardice and complicity of Democratic leadership, but unfortunately I'm not. The thing is, we just can't wait for them to show the strength and the fire and the recognition that what we're facing here is a right-wing international assault on both democracy, on people of color, on anybody that they can use as a target to further consolidate their control of the state in order to control it for their billionaire paymasters. And, you know, we've got a lot of people in power in the Democratic Party who are still stuck in the 90s. And I know we're going to just have to fax them some messages into their offices to let them know to get with the program and figure out what we're actually up against here. These are not good faith attacks on Representative Omar. These are not random mischaracterizations of her. This is a coordinated hit campaign on her, and it will end in violence, as you have said. They are whipping their supporters up into a frenzy based on false statements. And you're seeing it played in their propaganda outlets, and you're seeing the President of the United States of America using his bully pulpit to focus on one person.
Right.
And, you know, what we see from Democratic leadership is either silence, we're hearing nothing, or something that looks a lot like both sides. Oh, well, yeah, he's whipping up violence aimed at Representative Omar, but she's getting violence whipped up at her. So, you know, really, I can see that both sides have something to do with it. It's sickening, and it's going to take the people raising our voices together, demanding new leadership, demanding a new direction for the Democratic Party, and forcing them to listen to our voices because they clearly do not know what we're up against.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking to Alex Lawson, the Executive Director of Social Security Works. We only have about 5 minutes left before our break, so we wanted to turn to what the topic of the show is we wanted to talk to you a little bit about, in your experience, the link between the folks on Social Security and poverty. If you have anything to say on that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Most people probably don't know that Social Security keeps millions of people out of poverty. It's actually a poverty prevention program, the most successful program that our country has ever seen. Before Social Security, 1 in 2 seniors lived in poverty. And now, although the percentage is too high, it's right at around the same as the rest of the population. In point of fact, on the old Monopoly board, catty corner to jail was a thing called the poorhouse, because back before Social Security, when people ran out of money and they didn't have family to support them, they were put in the poorhouse. Those were American debtors' prisons. They locked the doors at night. These are the places that parents would tell their children stories about. You better work hard or you're going to end up in the poorhouse. Social Security eliminated the poorhouse from the collective memory of Americans, and they did it by building a program that works for all of us. We pay into it. We pay into it when we're working, and it's there for us when we need it, whether that's when we retire, and it's there for us when we lose wages, when we need it, whether it's when we retire, if we face a life-altering disability that allows us to not work anymore, then it provides disability insurance, or in the death of a breadwinner, it provides benefits to the minor children, which also makes Social Security the largest children's program in the country. This is just a system that works. It does all of that on less than 1% administrative cost, less than 1 penny of every dollar that we pay into Social Security goes to administer the whole program. And that's why Wall Street spends all their time trying to destroy it, because it works so well that they can't make any money off of it.
Yeah, and Alex, this is Samina, Shauna's co-host. I just wanted to just go back to your comment about disability, and that because that's one of sort of our big themes on the show today. And again, it's sort of like there's always this argument of like, well, those folks, are not. There's again, I'm literally having conversations with people who I think are on my side, and they're like, oh, but those folks who aren't working, they're not paying into it, and it's again, there's like this sort of right-wing talking points have been so effective at attacking programs like Social Security, and now you have people talking about things like universal basic income. My fear with some of these things like UBI is that they might be used as a justification to then pull back on Social Security. I was just curious about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, as long as they're done on a separate track, I'm more than happy to hear arguments about UBI. But Social Security works. That's why the billionaires hate it, and we need to do everything we can to keep their billionaire hands off of it. The only problem with Social Security right now is that benefits are far too low for millions of Americans. And so what we need to do is radically increase Social Security benefits, both for everybody, for retirees, for folks with disabilities, for surviving children. And we need to pay for it by, let's use that wealth tax that Elizabeth Warren proposed that is massively popular. There's a lot of things we can do with Social Security that lessen inequality. It's massively redistributive because of the progressivity of its benefit structure. But in fact, the revenue is regressive at the moment. There's a cap.
Right.
People
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the salary cap that has been, several folks have proposed bills to raise the salary cap. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we should get rid of it so that millionaires and billionaires pay in on every single one of their dollars, whether earned or unearned income, just like the rest of us. But I think we can even go further. We could dedicate a massive estate tax to Social Security or a wealth tax. But it's time to stop the upward redistribution of wealth that's been happening for the last 40 years, and expanding Social Security is a great way to start that.
Yeah, I think the cap right now, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, was in the era, like a range of like 128,000 or so. So like if you make more than that, you don't pay Social Security tax on anything above that. So that really hurts really kind of, working and middle class earners in terms of their taxes, because they're paying, obviously, they're really the ones funding it.
Correct. And, it's a little bit higher than that, but basically what you have is millionaires and billionaires stop paying into Social Security on January 1st every year. The rest of us pay in every day on all of our income, and we need to change that.
Right.
Thank you so much for being here. We have to go for now, Alex, but we hope you'll come back to talk more about this.
Always. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alex.
And feel better.
Okay, I think we're going to take a quick break. We are going to come back with Sharonda Knott Dawson and JJ Wett. We're talking about disability, poverty, and race. You are listening to the Left. I'm Samina Mustafa.
And I am Shauna East.
I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
We're producing a show on WCPT Sundays at 1 o'clock.
What should we call it?
How about Smash the Patriarchy?
I like it, but that's a lot of pressure. What about left-leaning ladies?
What about womansplaining?
Yeah, but what about when we have guys on? What about Madigan's worst nightmare?
He gets enough attention.
I got it. To the left.
I like that. That could work.
Tune in to The Left with Samina and Shauna on WCPT 820, Sundays at 1.
We are back. You are listening to the Left. I'm Samina Mustafa.
And I am Shauna East.
You can hear us on WCPT 820. You can see us on our Facebook page at To The Left Radio, facebook.com/To The Left Radio. All of our handles are at To The Left Radio. We are talking today about Social Security, disability, race, and poverty. No big deal. And trying to do it in less than an hour. We're ambitious here at To The Left. And we're really excited to have a guest in studio, disability rights advocate, Sharonda Knott Dawson is in studio, and in a little bit we're going to loop in JJ Wett as well. But welcome, Sharonda, to To The Left.
I'm so excited to be here.
Hi, Sharonda.
Hi, I'm excited to be to the left. To the left.
There you go.
Yes.
We're going to get sued by Jay-Z and Beyonce, but that's okay. That's okay. Just the Bayhive do not come after us. Do not do that. But Sharonda, if you can talk a little bit about the work that you do, and then we can kind of get into, and then we're going to pull JJ in as well.
Sure. I am a disability advocate, and it's really started with my daughter when she was 2, and we realized that she had some special needs, a speech delay and developmental delay, and we had the hardest time, my husband and I, navigating the system. And what was interesting is that I went to graduate school for nonprofit management and did a specialty in government and working systems. And I still was completely lost and floored in this whole new world of special education, disability advocacy. And so I realized at that point, if it was so hard for our family, I couldn't imagine how much more difficult this was for people with less resources or, less ability to kind of navigate systems. And so that's really where the advocacy started. And it started with me just kind of sharing our personal information, like this state had a program. If you think your child's speech delayed, they'll have somebody come out to your house, right, and do these evaluations. And once I talked about it with my middle-class white friends, they're like, oh, yeah, we did this with my child. And yet none of my black friends had ever heard about it. And so it really became like this mission-based thing to me to like share this information, because I think so often we have not information hoarding, but it's in your own sort of social circle. And for me, like black people and my people weren't talking about it. And so I really, tried to engage in this world completely. And then I am also disabled. And so understanding what that looks like, disability services and advocacy for my daughter at a school level, but then also for me as an adult going through the world, what's my rights? What do I need? How do I best advocate for all of the disability stuff? It's so huge, right? The disability circle, right. It's so big. I'm trying to, just kind of focus on it, but it's how do I get involved in this community? And I think that's one of the best things that I've learned is that it is a community, and the disability community. Like I understand there's a black community and there's a feminist community, and I am so honored and been so welcomed by this disability community that has, the motto, nothing about us without us. And so really looking at any policy, any organization, anything that's happening that has to deal with people with disabilities need to have disabled people in the room making those decisions. And so it's just been really exciting. It's a lot of work because there's so much that needs to be done around disability rights, particularly for kids of color, low-income folks in schools and in communities.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you had already navigated some of these conversations for yourself, but now then, like with your daughter, you have to navigate the education sphere.
Yes. And I'm sure you guys are aware, CPS had the lawsuit because they were failing to provide the services that were necessary for students at the special education students at CPS, and they had a state monitor come in. They're still not doing anything. And this is, kind of in these big systems that people are talking about. But then what about these small towns? What about people that don't have access to lawyers, that don't have access to the information that they need to be successful? And one of the things that it's really starting to bother me is that the wording is off. And so when you say special education, I think people think it's like an extra perk, like, you know, you behave in school, you get like a special treat, when that's not at all what we're talking about. We're talking about access, like your legal access to get into the building. If you put in a ramp to a school, that's not special. That's what you need to get in. And that's the same with dyslexia, with mental health services, with learning disabilities, with speech disabilities. This is what kids need to do to function in schools, and schools just aren't doing it. It's not special. It's not extra. It's legally the rights and entitlement of all kids to have access to education.
Right.
And I wanted to touch upon earlier, Alex Lawson brought up the point I was hoping he would bring up, which was that, you know, these benefits are not enough for people to live off of. And J.J. Wett, who is the vice chair of the DeKalb County Democratic Party, he actually contacted us a month or two back, and he brought up the fact that he wanted to come on and speak about the link between poverty and disability, and how, you know, like what Alex was saying earlier, that it's not enough, and you often have to rely on people to help you, family members, and some people don't have family members. So can we bring JJ into the conversation? JJ, your mic is live and you're on To the Left. If you just want to introduce yourself and the work that you do in relation to disability rights.
Perfect. Well, first off, I just want to thank you guys for having me on the show. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but this snowstorm, of course, on April 14th,
Yes.
from getting there.
Climate change.
For sure. And if we don't believe in it yet, we need to, because otherwise it's only going to get worse. But as for me, I have a lifelong disability. I've had spinal muscular atrophy, which is a form of muscular dystrophy. I never walked as a child, and I have been on a ventilator since I was 1.5 years old. And I always like to say, when you have a disability, you don't choose politics. Politics chooses you. We often enter the political arena knowing that our services that we receive to live our lives fully can get cut just like that. And so I've lived this life for the past 33 years, and I've been on my own since I was 18. But I know that we were talking about Social Security and the poverty cycle. And when we're talking about disability, Social Security, the average payment is only $1,234 per month. Now, I want everyone to stop and just think for a moment how much their rent is. And most often, that is barely going to cover their rent, let alone all their groceries and other medical needs that are involved with that. And so, for years, I've just been advocating disability communities on a larger scale to get the services and really the benefits needed to live their lives fully and completely.
No, that's an excellent point, and I know that Alex didn't have time to talk about it, but that was one of the other things I think that was provision of some of these expansions of Social Security is to do the COLA adjustment, which there just hasn't been enough, even on the Democratic side, enough sort of support for that. And thank you for being here. I'm Samina. We haven't met, but we're connected on social media, so I'm really excited and honored that you reached out to us and helped us. Give some much needed attention to the subject. So I also wanted to kind of come back to something that Sharonda was talking about in terms of sort of the institutional thing. So like if you kind of zoom out and think about how, kind of we as advocates and allies can push. So we know Social Security is one of those things. What are some other things that we can do to be strong advocates in this fight?
I think the first thing is just understanding that there is a community, a really strong community of people that are disabled that are fighting for the right to make decisions about their lives, right? And that all lives have, value, and if you're disabled, regardless of how severe the disability is, that the person is still there, and they're the people that need to be making these decisions, right? And so I think for me, even it's called person-centered planning or person-centered living, but instead of looking at disabilities, it's like, how do we help them? It's more like, how do we get disabled people, and we listen to hear what they want and let them help themselves, right? And so really bringing in the disability community into the folds of every conversation, right? Because disabilities really is in every conversation. It's in Social Security, it's in Medicare, it's in schools, it's in prisons. There's in Cook County now, there are people who have served their time in prison, but they cannot leave because they do not have accessible housing available for them, right? So there are people that are still sitting there because there's not an amount of accessible housing. In Illinois, we still have more people institutionalized than I think 47 other states. And so there's a big push from people that are disabled saying we want to be able to have customized employment and customized housing. And it's not happening in Illinois. And then, like I said, even at the micro level at Chicago, in the schools, we have kids that aren't getting access to speech therapy, occupational therapy. One that I'm really upset about and really think that we need to talk about is mental health, right? Like mental illness as a disability. And we saw this in Florida where, there's a rash of suicide rates going up. And people are saying, okay, this is directly connected to kind of crime. But then what happens if you look in Chicago and there's these communities where kids are living and there's crime all the time, right? There's PTSD, there's this complex trauma. How do schools support them? How are you supposed to learn? And there's a group, I forgot, Healing Hurt People, and I think it's University of Chicago, and they help doctors with trauma-informed care, right? So letting the doctors know, like, not to make loud noises because that may, startle them. And also giving the kids who have been shot kind of tools that they need to know to be successful. And I'm just like, why don't they do this in schools, right? Like, why is this, only happening in hospitals? If you know that this sort of trauma happens and that this is what happens when you live in a high crime neighborhood and you're hyper vigilant and there's tools that can help you, why aren't we providing those tools for everyone?
Right.
One thing I want to bring up is, me and Samina, I'm not sure about your political leanings, but also JJ all run in progressive circles. And I just want to, hold our fellow progressives accountable and talk about how, a lot of meetings don't have ADA accessibility, or they don't have anything on the page about accessibility. And JJ, can you talk a little bit about like some of the struggles you've had in that area with, progressive spaces being welcoming to folks with disabilities?
For sure. And, I think for me, something happened to me actually last Friday that I really wasn't expecting. And to kind of go off Rashonda here, I'm a therapist also, and I'm the clinical director now for the DeKalb County Youth Service Bureau. And we have quarterly meetings for the crisis service that we provide. And they're all over the state, Rockford, Chicago, all the way down to Springfield, all the way down to Southern Illinois. Last Friday, the meeting was actually in Bloomington. So I drove 2 hours. I did have a coworker with me. And I get there, and the facility where the meeting was supposed to take place had 8 stairs to get to the meeting and no elevator.
Wow.
And so this still happens today where a lot of us are segregated just simply on the basis of physical ability. So what I did is, of course, my coworker went to the meeting. I sent an email to the director of the training organization, and of course I received several apologies, but to think that a progressive organization like that would have a meeting in a place that was not accessible in 2019, it kind of blew my mind. And, I'm the clinical director. I'm supposed to be going to these meetings, but I couldn't go. And so that's just a prime example of the accessibility within our society that just does not allow us to get access to certain buildings. And another one to go along with that really is housing. Housing, of course, is one of the hardest things for somebody in a wheelchair to find just because of access.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, JJ. And I was, my background has been in commercial real estate, so buildings where people would go to an office, to a clinic, excuse me, and a lot of those buildings, especially even in downtown Chicago, people don't realize you go throughout the country, and there are so many buildings where people are expected to see a physician or see a therapist, and they aren't accessible. And people think, we had the ADA pass, whatever, almost 30 years ago, but a lot of building owners have said, we are, substantially compliant, or we've done enough. But that also sort of feeds into your original point, which is how are folks that need accommodation going to get those jobs and then, be able to survive financially?
Exactly. And I think to kind of go off that, with what we were talking about with the income limit and Social Security, as well as other programs that help us survive, really it limits us in what we can do. And I know for a second there we were talking about policy, and one of the things that I kind of want to bring up policy-wise is that the two things that would solve all of this is universal health care and a universal basic income. Because if we had both those, all other areas would be a lot easier.
That's an interesting point, and something we actually brought up with Alex Lawson earlier from Social Security Works. And I'm a big proponent for Medicare for All. I didn't get to mention this to Alex. I'm going to be in D.C. in a couple of weeks talking about this, and Alex will be on the panel on the workshop that I'm going to be talking in. So I'll get to meet Alex in person. But no, you're absolutely right, and there's actually been some nice expansions to the bill on this issue, and I know ADAPT was one of the organizations that was at the table. So that's definitely an important thing. My only concern with some of these other programs, whether it's universal basic income or expansion of Social Security, is that expansion is not then going to be used as a justification to contract another program. That's my only concern. And I
think it typically is.
Right.
Like when I see the people proposing UBI, I'm like, because they're not the most progressive people, and I'm like, okay, why are they proposing this? Is it so they don't have to give us universal health care? Is it so that they don't have to give us Social Security and other,
right?
I don't like to use the word entitlements because we're paying for them. It's not an entitlement.
Yeah, and that's, and go back to JJ's point about, having even progressives understand the real world implications. Like, how does that show up in terms of how you where you schedule a meeting? Understanding that there are people, to Sharonda's point, there are people behind these policies. This is not an abstraction. And what was the phrase you used for us?
Nothing about us without us,
which I love.
And I think too, it's this idea of disability is becoming so huge that we there are people that were born with disabilities, but all of us are an accident away from being disabled, right? We can be, and if something happened to you, heaven forbid, and all of a sudden you start looking, you can't get into your home anymore. You can't get into your job anymore. All these services. This isn't, I think, just for special people. This is a security system like Social Security that benefits all of us, right? And so we want systems in place that would work if you became disabled or if you became disabled. And with our elderly population growing, I mean, it's more, the population of disability is growing in this country, and who is disabled. And we, in our policies and our businesses, our systems don't reflect it. It's funny because most women I know figure it out when they have babies with strollers and start taking CTA. And they know which
they know which CTA stations are accessible. They immediately figure it out.
Not the new Belmont station by my house.
They spent how much? $17 million and did not
couldn't manage. Just despicable.
An elevator.
And so it's it's like, oh, the baby stroller thing. But it's like, yeah, that's also people with walkers and wheelchairs, and which streets to avoid because they don't have the the ability for you to navigate it with the stroller. And so I think we just have to broaden kind of our awareness of that from just us to how is this impacting everyone.
Yeah, and we got actually a couple of folks calling in. Do we want to?
I just quickly want to give a shout out to all my peeps that have invisible disabilities, because I actually am living with disabilities and people don't know that.
Right.
And I don't think we should draw a distinction between people with visible and invisible disabilities, that everyone needs equal consideration.
No, and I'm glad you said that. And it looks like we have a couple of folks.
I don't want to take Paul in Seattle, so
Okay.
no.
Do we want to do David?
Sure.
David in San Francisco.
Hey, greetings. We've got a nice day out here. It's the 50th anniversary of People's Park. So, we've got a nice opportunity out here. Hey, I'm always thrown by this use of the word entitlement as if it's a disparaging thing. You remember the Declaration of Independence says that we the people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I've heard these right-wingers claim that the Declaration of Independence is only a statement and that it's not a force of law, as if we, the people, don't have the right to life because that's not in the Constitution. And in fact, these same right-wingers are out there claiming that only the first 13 colonies are subject to the Bill of Rights, and the other 47 states, plus Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and whatnot, aren't deserving of the Bill of Rights or any of the other protections of the Constitution. So, to me, entitled means you're entitled to it, and it's not a disparaging thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, and thanks for your comment, David. We're going to let you go, and we're just going to chat about it on the air. But I think, the problem is that's been used, it's been weaponized by the right? So in terms of using it as something that, even though people are paying into it, taxpayers are paying into it, that somehow it's something that isn't, it's a giveaway, and it's not, or it's somehow wasteful. I think we might have lost JJ. I think Lady B might be trying to get him back on the line. But that's something that, again, when it comes to even things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, that there was a vote, I think it was just last year, where they were trying to repeal it. And you just think that, to Sharonda's point, the population is full of folks with disabilities, visible and not, but also we have a population that's aging. My own mother uses a walker and sometimes a wheelchair. I mean, this is not something she, was when she was 22, she wasn't using one, but now she is now. So, I mean, it's something that is going to be more and more needed. So to have buildings that don't have, doorways that are wide enough. I mean, these are just real world realities.
And one of the best examples someone gave me of assisted technology. So what are the things that we need in order to be successful? Like I have an invisible disability as well. And so there's certain things that I need. I bring a walker, or I have different things, but glasses. Right? There was a point before when we didn't have glasses and you were disabled because you couldn't see. Mm-hmm. And then we developed glasses, and that's a tool that you put on to be used. And so I think that that's the mindset that we go through. It's like, not can a person participate, but what does a person need to participate in any environment, right? That's a different question. And when we ask those questions, then we start to plan differently. And even in progressive meetings, like I love my progressive folks, but like every meeting is late at night. It's in a church basement. There's no phone. I mean, even with like the ability now to do Facebook Live and to have calls, we don't do that. And I think part of it's because, organizers are just like, there's something going on. Let's get together. Let's have a meeting. And they don't always think like, people aren't able to get to the meetings.
We just have a couple minutes left, so I wanted to give you both a chance to tell folks how to plug into anything that you're working on, anything that you want to mention.
So I have a blog, SharondaTribune.com. And I did Tribune, ironically, because I do not like the Chicago Tribune. I do not think they are for the people, but really looking at disability advocacy there. And then also I just finished a program called the Illinois Partners in Policymaking, which is another training ground, particularly that would be helpful for those people that are of color and that need access to this information, because the world is huge. It's Medicare, it's ADA, it's IDA, it's all these acronyms. And so there's training. And then lastly, I'm on the board of Access Living, one of the best organizing organizations in Chicago, and I think in the nation, in terms of really putting it out there and making sure that people with disabilities are at the table making decisions and forcing the government and businesses to do what they are legally entitled to do.
Right. And we lost JJ for a second.
We
got him back. So JJ, hopefully you heard, we're just wanting you to plug the work that you do and how folks can get a hold of you.
Well, I think for me, I've always been just a staunch advocate for universal health care, and I've organized with plenty of people here in Northern Illinois, particular Northern Illinois Democratic Socialists of America, to push for that universal health care. And whether that's lobbying with Congress people, state legislators, anyone of that nature, we need to get the word out that really the universal health care, especially for people with disabilities, is going to benefit us. And not only that, it's going to benefit taxpayers because it's a lot more cost effective with universal health care than it is with our privatized insurance. And then I think on top of that, part of the reason I became the vice chair in Cobb County Dems is because I've always wanted to push the Democratic Party to the left. And so I think that for all of us to make sure we're connected with our legislators to tell them and reiterate to them what we need as people with disabilities and the disability community to get the services and access we need to live our lives fully.
And just 1 second left, literally. Any website or anything people can go to if they want to get in touch with you, JJ?
For me, it's my Facebook page because I also ran for county board.
Okay.
So you just look up JJ White on Facebook, and either it'll be my personal page or my political page.
Great. So thank you so much to Sharonda Knott Dawson, our guest today in the studio, to JJ Wett, who could not make it today, but we just talked to him on the phone. Thank you to all those at home amplifying our show on social media. Next week, we have Zoe Chan, who is Byron Sigcho Lopez's campaign manager, and possibly other female campaign managers on.
So we're going to have Candace Castillo, who is with Jeanette Taylor, and I just just heard from Jessica Peters, who was campaign manager for Andre Vasquez. So we're doing a women who got the job done in elections. Just to highlight those voices and put them out front. They're usually behind the scenes. So we'll be back next week. Any other plugs or things
just
that you got?
Donate to us so we can stay on the air.
Yeah,
it's patreon.com/To the Left Radio. And thank you to Ms. Lady B and Dennis.
Yes.
As usual. And thanks to Alex Lawson, out in D.C., Social Security Works Executive Director, for being on.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Alex, and look forward to meeting you in a couple of weeks. One last plug, I wanted just to give a shout out. I'm actually going to be Ali Marcella, who is our guest co-host, emergency guest co-host. I'm going to be speaking with a group of her colleagues at DePaul University on Wednesday. There's going to be a talk on women in politics, so I'm excited about that. But we are out of time. Thanks so much, Lady B, Dr. D, Dennis, for helping us out. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much.